Well, hello, everybody. It is game changer chat time, and you've got a two ginger game changer chat. This may be a first. Woo woo! Supporting, we're not dying out. Apparently, that's a myth.
That's
Anyway,
right. Yeah.
welcome to Game Changer Chats. I'm Tevis Trower, and I created this series, one in celebration of my book, but both efforts are actually the result of my own strong conviction that we need a new paradigm of what it means to be successful. And the reason that we need that is that the old paradigm hasn't been working for a long time. I mean, you look at depression, anxiety, you look at burnout, you look at all the ills in society, and it's pretty clear that it has not been working for a while. The other thing is that the changes coming in terms of our global landscape suggests that it's not even going to exist a whole lot longer. And so I look for people like my guest here, Joyce Lanigan, who have built a life on their own terms and haven't just gone for checking the boxes of what are all the shoulds of, the house and the this and the that and the title and I gotta climb. And she's one of the people I have met recently, who has really stood out as giving herself some freedom. So before we dive in, I'm going to give you a couple of tech notes. As you know, we're simulcasting across YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook Live on two different channels, and I don't always know which channel is being picked up in the chat feed. So if you do put in a chat and we don't acknowledge it, I promise you, as does Joyce, we solemnly swear. You have to swear. Yeah, yes, thank you. We solemnly swear that we will circle back and answer your comments and questions, and we would love to. So please be a part of this. So without further ado, I welcome and I share with you Joyce Lanigan. Joyce, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Well, if you have watched a couple of my Game Changer chats, then you kind of have a little hint how I'm going to start. I'm going to start by asking you, what did you most love to do as a little one?
My most love in the world has always been animals. So from as early as I can remember, my dream job was to be a vet. I used to trap stray cats in my back garden, domesticate them, and just that was my thing. So I've always been an animal person. And once I got a little bit older, to express my particular opinion on things, my two particular loves were rabbits and horses. So
wow.
they continue to feature in my life.
Wow. So we're gonna let the cat out of the bag and say that your accent is authentic.
It's the real deal. I didn't get voice lessons from Tom Cruise, I promise you.
Yeah, right. That would be a nightmare. You grew up in Ireland, correct?
That is correct.
What part of Ireland?
I'm from Dublin, so capital, and I am from the city part of Dublin, basically within smelling distance of the Guinness Brewery. So I grew up sort of not in a country environment, so as a little kid, my animal access was limited. But yeah, Dubliner through and through. Growing up on the whiff of the Guinness Brewery, so it doesn't get much more Irish than that.
What did you think you were going to be when you were growing up?
To be honest, I had no expectations. I grew up in a working class family in inner city Dublin, as a kid in the 70s. And there was no real expectation. The hope and aspiration that you kind of aim for was either being a nurse, a secretary, or a teacher.
Oh, wow.
Which kind of scares me because I'm old, but I'm not that old.
Yeah.
I remember, going to see the career counselor in school to tell them that I wanted to be a vet, and they were basically like, "No chance of that. Maybe set your sights a little lower and do a nice secretarial course." So
wow,
that was the background from which I came.
So how did you shrug that off? I mean, you're a city dweller, right? You're being told to lower your aspirations and to kind of simmer down. And I think a lot of us, no matter what age you are, or gender, or skin color, or a lot of us have been told that we just need to
Yeah.
simmer down,
Yeah.
right? Um, how did that play out for you? Because I'll let the other cat out of the bag, and that is that you became an extremely successful tech executive.
Yes.
And you went on to actually do something, even in my mind, even more audacious, and that is to um, allow yourself to make an absurd leap of going from tech to being inspired and feeling called to create business around Aboriginal culture and art
Yeah.
in Australia. So how did you give yourself the moxie? Like where did you have to dig to emerge from the why don't you just take a secretarial course?
Uh, I think it's got to have been my parents. I'm one of four, and we all grew up in the same environment, and but we all went on to do amazing things. In fact, I would say that I'm the failure of the family.
Oh my god, that's
and
scary.
I think it was my parents just let us be who we needed to be. I think there was no pressure of an expectation, but there was. They gave us an environment that allowed us to be curious and explore things in a way that we weren't
Yeah.
even getting to do at school. So I think that just gave us all this fire in our belly to try different things and not have any fear of failure, which I think is a really fear is such a limiting factor in
Yeah.
people's decision making.
Yeah.
So I was just like, I felt like I had a very solid foundation with my family, and it was just like from there, it's just like I can do anything, and even if I completely screw it up, I can go home and the
You'll
people
still
who
get love.
are going to still love me. So I think that's
Yeah.
very liberating, and I know not everybody has that, but
No.
if I was to put it to anything, I would put it to that.
When you reflect on your life, what is the first sign that you can see that you were gonna chart your own path? Or what was the first crazy move that you made?
First very crazy move was actually to start riding horses. Again, inner city kid.
So you
Was
weren't rich, right? Your parents didn't.
No, nobody was, putting a silver spoon in my mouth in any shape or form.
Yeah.
But I got the opportunity to ride at a local riding school with a school friend who was obsessed with horses. And from the second I sat in that saddle, it was like something switched on in my brain.
Oh.
And I just was very fortunate in the fact that I got to work in the stables to earn my free lesson once a week, and the owner of the stable saw something in me, and she kind of took me on to develop that talent. So I ended up being a pretty decent rider, and through riding and being exposed to cross country competitions and um, hunting and eventing, I got exposed to a different class of people.
Mm.
And Irish culture and a lot of European culture is very stratosphered. You don't easily move within sort of economic grouping very easily. So I was like
That's
this
amazing.
fake fake fancy kid. But actually, I was going home to my little 3-bedroom semi at the end of my fancy horse day. But
Yeah.
opening my eyes to seeing how other people lived, and people ran businesses and had jobs where they wore suits to work, and had gone to university and all these things. They weren't in my world. So that not only gave me my real passion, but it also gave me a window into a world that I really didn't know existed.
Isn't that amazing? I think that the limitations of assumption about in what worlds can I move and be safe,
Yeah.
right? I've seen even in my own my own family that when we're confronted with a world that we're afraid that we're gonna not be equal to, or that we're not gonna know the right words or have the right clothes or know the right, it's all social currency, right? And social currency is really specific to different social groups, and I think it actually is the seeds of a lot of the imposter syndrome that everyone's talking about, which I get so sick of that word,
Mhm.
right? I started talking about it like 6 years ago, and now it's everywhere, and I'm like, I wish we could move on, but unfortunately, it's just such a place. But you getting to travel worlds, being a
Yeah,
migrant a couple times a week, right? You were a
yeah,
migrant across, an immigrant really, across worlds.
yeah,
Um, it sounds like it gave you some sense of the ability, of your own ability to adapt.
yeah. And I think, I've in my career, I've transferred between so many different industries, and it's always been sort of like, can I fit in this new industry? Can I fit in this new country? I mean, I've moved, all over the world. I've worked so many places, and I think it is from that grounding of learning how to, move into different environments, continue to be yourself, but shift enough that people will accept you.
Yeah,
Because if you go in with everything that you've brought from one world into another, it's alienating. I mean, our fundamental principle as humans is we look for the connection.
yeah,
And we always look for what's common. So when you meet somebody, it's like, oh, did you do this? Did we have anything in common that we can anchor our friendship on?
yeah,
And I think that that's so exactly what happens no matter if you're moving jobs, countries, industries. It's that ability to connect
yeah.
that makes it smoother for you to
It's
do that.
so true.
Yeah,
And it's this amazing dance. And I think this is really the sign of a master, right? It's a skill worth mastering, is to both know who you are, so you know what you're aligning with on the
yeah,
inside, right? Because you had to know who you were to move through these worlds, but you also had to have the humility and the wisdom to not judge
yeah,
the world either that you were moving into or that you were coming from. You had to have the ability to really align with it exactly as it was,
yeah.
or is, right, as you continue to move through worlds, because I know both of us do, all of us do. We
Yeah.
continue to move through worlds. So how do we both stay true to self and align with what is? And I think that's such a beautiful
Mm.
key skill set to point out that all of us really need to do more.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I think it is a practiced skill.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a case of two things. You have to be comfortable to make a fool of yourself.
Oh, for sure.
Comfortable to ask the stupid questions, do the stupid thing. I always describe it as like you have to be willing to be the tourist, to allow
Ask,
yourself,
ask directions.
yeah, to ask directions. And it's those moments of discomfort as you're moving into something new. And
Yeah.
then it's also, you have your internal kind of, compass as to what's right, what's wrong. And if you're moving into something that really doesn't align, I mean, it's okay if it's not 100% aligned, but if there's a fundamental mismatch, to know to get out and know that that's not a situation that you're ever going to be able to live harmoniously in and
Yeah.
be yourself.
I
Um,
think that's a really huge point too, because if you're coming from your personal truth, then it's not about compromising on your personal truth. It's about negotiating the gap.
yeah,
In my mind, right? The gap between your personal truth and the truth of whatever the situation is.
yeah,
And in most situations, there is a way
hmm,
to negotiate the gap in such a way that neither party is made wrong,
yeah,
right? Of course, those are really inflammatory words to even say these days, because all of us are so incredibly divided, but we won't go down the political rabbit hole because if we do, Joyce,
I know
we're never getting out.
that's a hole too deep to dig into. But
I know, I
the
know.
only thing I'll say on it is that it's about being open to a different way and at least allowing you to hear it and
Yeah,
decide what you want to do with it. I think the
yeah,
most damaging situation you can do in any circumstance, any negotiation, any movement that you're doing into a different environment is to be so rigid, to
yeah,
believe that your view is the only view and everybody else is wrong.
yeah.
That's where things get bad quickly. But that we will put a box around and move on.
Well, if anyone wants, I'll send you my favorite Ram Dass quote of the week that came out, and he was saying, the thing about empathy and compassion is not that you're just bleeding all over the page. It's that you're willing to see the full truth.
Yeah.
The full truth, not just your opinion and not just the other. You're willing to see the full reality of why each of us is the way we are, right? Because each of us is the way we are for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. And
And
I've traveled so much, and I've been very lucky to, cross so many different cultures. And what always strikes me is that there are so many more similarities than there are differences. We fundamentally, as humans, and I can say from, taxi drivers in Dubai to moguls in China, that their fundamental desire is to love their family and keep the people that they care in their world safe.
yep.
And everything else is, above that, is adding on to that. But fundamentally, we are all the same.
Say that 50 times. Fundamentally, we are all
Fundamentally,
the
we are
same.
all the same.
Fundamentally, we are all the same. Fundamentally, that needs to be a mantra. So you have been able to experience our sameness, even with the window dressing of
Yeah,
difference that oftentimes gets the headline, right?
yeah.
Um, you got into tech. How did that happen? Because I want to just get to a point where I can shine the light on just how amazing some of the choices that you've made are. How did you get into tech exactly?
It's
Yeah.
been, I've had a very serendipitous career, is how I'll describe it. So, my first job out of high school, because I didn't do the traditional university route, I actually got an internship with Credit Lyonnais, the French bank.
Mhm.
And I was working in the Treasury Department of Credit Lyonnais in Dublin. And we put in a new dealing room system, and I was part of the implementation team for the dealing room system implementation. And I was having a few issues with working in the bank at the time because I had a very chauvinistic boss who was really putting his foot on my career aspirations,
Yeah.
and I felt very stifled in the environment. And the company that we put in the dealing room system, it was an Irish-based software company, kind of early stage. It was like the beginning of what we called the Celtic Tiger, where all the tech
I
companies.
remember. Yeah.
So I'm the original species of the Celtic tiger, and anyway, I was approached by the company who created the dealing room system to come and work for them, and that started probably the craziest job I've ever had. We were based in Dublin, we had offices in London, but we sold all over the world. And our euphemism was we sold to emerging markets, which was basically third world countries.
Yeah.
So I traveled for basically 9 months of the year, each year, and worked everywhere from Haiti, Colombia at the height of the drug wars,
Yeah.
all over Central America, all over Asia. And then with that job, I ended up moving to Singapore to head up their operations for Asia Pacific, which gave me the territory from China all the way to Taiwan,
Which is
northern,
that?
yes, all the way, basically the whole of Asia, excluding
Wow.
Russia. So
Wow.
it was a crazy existence, but it gave me so many amazing experiences, and
Yeah.
then it also gave me a travel bug, and probably most disappointing for my family, it gave me the reality that the sun shone in other places. And
It wasn't raining
it
in
didn't rain
Singapore?
365 days of the year, so I never went back. I never went back to
Oh.
Ireland. I continued my nomading around the planet. So,
Yeah. It's funny, I think, there are really magical times that, that happen in our lives. While you were doing that, I was doing the same thing in Latin America, and we often are able to be in active observation. Wow, this is a window,
mhm,
and it's magical, and it's specific, and it's not going to last forever.
yeah,
And it sounds like you had that ability to both be in it and to step back and observe it for the
yeah.
magical thing it was. When you knew it was over and you began to transition, can you just share with us how did becoming the founder or the co-founder of 2 global fragrance brands happen from that?
Right.
Because that's a big that's another world migration
Yeah,
happening.
I'm looking at my. I mean, how long have you got? I'll give you the. I will give you the Reader's Digest version. So, I um I got to the point where I was so exhausted from the travel, and I was not feeling very fulfilled with the work. It was getting repetitive.
Mhm.
So I decided I needed to jump company. I also had just met my then boyfriend, now husband. He was living in Ireland. I was living in Singapore. So we're doing the long distance thing, and my job was not helping. So anyway, long story short, I quit that job, got another job that moved us to Australia, and I continued to work in the tech sector, but moving into mining and oil and gas and all that good stuff. Um,
Wow.
bad stuff, depending on how you look at
Not
it.
fragrance.
Not fragrance in any shape or form. And then I ended up my last real job before I started all this craziness. I worked for a commercial law firm as their business development manager and strategist.
Girl, this is a head spinner.
I know, which was actually, and I never thought I'd say, but I love my lawyers. They were a great bunch. I really learned so much, and I thoroughly enjoyed the work.
Yeah.
It was actually through that firm that I really started to become aware of Indigenous rights and the Indigenous issues in Australia. Because the firm, once a native title claim was settled, we had a practice area that went into the Indigenous communities to help them set up negotiate and set up their trusts and corporate structures to deal with the royalties coming from the mining and oil and gas companies that were mining the resources on their tribal lands. And
Wow.
I got to meet some amazing people who genuinely thought in a very different way to everything we believe in the West. And I don't know, it kind of opened my eyes to something different. And it also made me, what I love about Aboriginal people, and this is not just Australian Aboriginal, but Aboriginal cultures around the world, is we tend to be very silo driven. So, this is my job, and this is my home life, and this is my hobby, and this is
Mhm.
my, spiritual or religious belief. And they're all
Yeah.
in these little buckets.
Pockets, yeah.
And, when you start to work with Indigenous people, they don't have those buckets. Like, they are ultimately creative beings, and their art and their work and their spirituality is all intermingled and wrapped in the complexity of who they are. And that just made so much more
Mm.
sense to me.
Makes so much more sense.
And their understanding of the natural environment and their understanding of like crazy things, like they understood quantum physics and genetics 30,000 years ago. It's just,
Yeah.
it blew my mind. So that opened something up in me to make me realize that my creativity as a human had been very significantly squashed by
Mhm.
being in this corporate world. And most of my tech career was in the 80s when shoulder pads were big and greed was good, and all you wanted to do was have like your design.
Gordon Gekko, right?
Totally. And so this was like a complete revelation that you could be so rich and be living in the desert, in the dirt, so
Amen.
so that was a revelation, and it started this crazy project that became a business called Nomad Two Worlds with my business partner, who's a Woodstockian photographer, Russell James.
Mhm.
And that eventually evolved into the fragrances by being introduced to an amazing uh, indigenous plant called fire tree or balga. And
Mhm.
it's burned for ceremony by the tribe, the Noongar people, who are the traditional owners of the area around Perth, Western Australia. And one of my very good friends and Indigenous mentors asked me if I'd help him make a perfume. And he gave me this oil, and it smelled magical and interesting. And then my marketing hat was going like, how hard could it be? Like, you just put some stuff in a bottle and make it happen.
Slap a label on it
Have a
and
label on it, and
call
you know.
Bernie's, right?
So that was my naivety, and I went down that path, and we had a long process of looking at the sustainability of of harvesting this particular
The
plant,
Baga.
figuring
Yeah.
out how to extract the oil, figuring out how
Mhm.
to actually get it registered as a cosmetic chemical ingredient, then getting to the point of like blending the fragrances and everything else. So it was a project of love, and the resulting product we just launched as an art kind of initiative and a limited edition, but it got great traction, and
Wow.
the concept behind the brand really resonated with a lot of people. So, um, by sheer bizarre circumstance, when we launched the oil, the perfume buyer for Barney's was at the event, and she came to me and said, I love what you're doing. I love the concept. I love the idea behind the brand, but you'd need to evolve it before you'll be able to sell it commercially. And we hadn't really thought about it as a like commercial venture at that stage. But I went behind the scenes and started to look at all of our indigenous connections around the world to see what ingredients could we access, could they be sustainably harvested, and what could we do as a sort of social mission driven business. And fast forward, and the result of that is a brand called Raw Spirit. And
Mm.
with that, we have collaborations and fragrances inspired by Australia, Indonesia, some Native American collaborations, and then more recently, the beautiful island of Bali. And
Oh, wow.
pretty excited because we're just also getting ready to launch our first Namibian collaboration.
Oh
So,
my God.
so that's been a project of passion, and just it's still a very tough business, but it's got some soul, and I love that about it. So,
Well, so I want to point out, just because I love to harvest, no pun intended. I love to harvest these conversations for the moments of absurdity, right?
mhm.
You get exposed to Aboriginal rights, have contact with them, start to sense that they have a different way of seeing the world, a la mutant message from down under,
Yeah,
right? Whatever you feel about that, right? But you have really primary contact with something that shows you there are a lot of ways of looking at the world,
yeah,
and there's no one has authority to say that one way is supreme over another, and you're touched by it. Someone brings you a piece of wood and says, "Can we make a perfume?" You had to learn how to perfume.
yes, I did.
I mean, this is so cool because here you are, professional services lawyer, tech, right? Doing all the, and I'm sure you were always true to yourself because that came through from the very start. And I think what's really amazing is a lot of times people, maybe they're excited by something, but they say, "How could I ever do that?
Mm,
I don't have money, or
yeah,
I've got a car payment, or I've got a house payment, or I've got to save up for kids' college," right? That we first go into the no, all the reasons why not,
yeah,
as opposed to, well, what if I just explored this a little? It's
yeah,
not a tattoo, right? And that's what I think is really compelling about what you did, is something spoke. to
Yeah.
that voice of wisdom inside of you that instead of shutting it up and saying that, "You simmer down,
Yeah.
little lady.
Yeah.
You simmer down,"
Right?
and
There's no simmering. There's no simmering.
no. There was just, simmering up into a really nice rolling boil, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing because I know you had to boil that wood to extract that oil.
Yes,
Anyway,
indeed.
all the metaphors are converging at this point. Um, so so you signed the deal with Barney's, right, which is everyone's dream come true. You also had a lower end line at Walmart?
Yes. So, um, born from, I always think about like the evolutions and what's born from what. So, a couple of years after launching Raw Spirit, the thing that kept on kind of getting to my attention was we'd have a lot of people. The fragrances are expensive, moderately expensive, based on the fact that we
Yeah.
are sourcing rare and expensive ingredients. And a lot of people were sort of asking for samples, and then they would come back and say, your perfumes are beautiful, but they're so expensive. I can't afford them. And then I was looking, well, I'm not an elitist. I come from very humble beginnings, and
Mhm.
I'm not, I haven't forgotten that. And then I went back to look at, well, what's actually available at kind of an affordable price point. And it was
Yeah.
just, very bland, sweet, sugary, as I would say, pink shit in a bottle.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, can I do what we've done with Raw Spirit, but do it in a way that is affordable and accessible? So, Wild Spirit was born from that, and it has the same principles of clean ingredients, sustainability, attention to detail in the juices, but we don't use as many super expensive raw materials. And we've scaled back on the packaging and that sort of thing. But what's in the bottle, what actually you put on your skin, is super high quality. And I really believe that if people smell quality, they'll know it.
Yeah.
And I had this concept, and I got the opportunity to pitch to Walmart, and they took it. So we've had an amazing partnership with Walmart. We launched with them with Wild Spirit in 2018,
Wow.
and yeah, it was just like kind of crazy that we got into the biggest retailer on the planet. So uh,
Go girl.
it's been a wild ride.
Well, so if you were gonna give people one note of inspiration, right? And I don't wanna call it advice because advice, everyone just
Yeah.
want it. I don't want it, right?
Yeah.
But what would be a nice invocation? Like how would you invoke people to follow their bliss more? Like what would you offer them?
I don't want to give advice either, because I think that that's just asking for trouble. But I
Mhm.
can only speak for myself as to what was my driving force, and it was always two things. I mean, definitely I've got a high tolerance for risk, and I
Mhm.
get that. That's why I've done what I've done. But I think for me, it was always like, what am I going to regret not doing? So what am
Amen.
I have a very clear picture of the idea of being at the end of my life, and sitting in my rocking chair in my nursing home and thinking, I wanted to collect memories, and I wanted to collect stories. I didn't want to collect things as much, because when I'm sitting in my, hopefully, touch wood, I'm either going to go out with a bang, or I'm going to last long enough to sit in my my nursing home chair, and I want to have stories to remember and to bring back to life. Probably drive everybody nuts with it, but that rich richness is
Mhm.
within, and it's driven by the fact that I don't want to regret the things that I didn't do. And I mean, it's like we're kind of on this like once in a lifetime chance to be on this planet, so be a tourist. Like,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to make a fool of yourself. And I think risk, you've got to accept that risk means possible failure, and that's okay, because
It's totally fine. I
nobody.
love it too, like, I haven't used this phrase in a long time to describe the difference between going for money and title and going for a rich life,
Yeah.
right? So can we go for a rich life? Well, I want to thank you for bringing that alive
Yeah.
for us and sharing time. We got rained out last week.
I know.
So anyway, um, one thing, Joyce said that coming into contact with a different set of values and nature was a game changer for her. And I am leading retreat with one of my favorite people, a lifelong shaman of the Lakota, Siberian, and Central American traditions
Right.
in July. And we are going to be outside on the planet the whole time throughout the weekend. So you can stay in cush accommodations. We're not going to make you sleep on the earth, but you are going to be learning how to shift your filter around truth. And I would love to share it with any of you. I just put the link into the chat boxes. I see my buddy Kevin Kunkel weighed in and said hi and told me I look like Meryl Streep's progeny. I'm closer to Meryl Streep's age. So thank you, Kevin Kunkel. This has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, Joyce.
No,
Truly. We're actually going hiking on Friday because we live in the same neighborhood. So this could have been in person. Next week, I have a genius woman named Stella Lupashore, who is a culture researcher who comes at things from an AI and a data analytics perspective. And she's really shaking things up around ageism at work, specifically for women. So if you are a middle aged female or an ally, which I know both these gingers are, right? Tune in because she's not just going to talk about shoulds. She's going to talk about the data that she is seeing. So to all of you, may you have a rich life, and let's go out there and game change because we need a new game. So thank you so much for joining us.
thank you. Thanks, Tevis.